This podcast serves Middle Tennessee every weekday morning, and it's made possible by member support. Learn how you can make a difference at WPLN.org/support.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's December 15th, 2025. Happy Hanukkah to all of you who celebrate. On this day in 1864, the Civil War battlefront finally made its way to our city. The two-day Battle of Nashville came after weeks of waiting. The Union officers here were getting pressure from Washington, D.C. to just attack already, while Confederates settled into encampments on roughly the same curving line that I-440 follows now. From a distance, it looked like the Northern Army was letting the Southern one get dangerously well established in this spot. But Middle Tennessee was experiencing a spell of weather that was very cold and very wet. Those Union officers knew there was a very big difference between how the two groups were experiencing that weather. Their troops were relatively warm and dry, while the rebels were suffering from exposure to the winter storm. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. The Battle of Nashville happened late enough in the war that any conflict was at least partially a battle between the haves and the have-nots. The Union Army was still well supplied, with even more resources in reserve. The Confederates were desperate for basically everything: food, warm clothes, boots that hadn't fallen apart from overuse. In Nashville, the contrast was especially evident because this city had been solidly under Union control for nearly 3 years. It was the most heavily fortified city anywhere in the war zone. It was a Union logistics hub. There were plenty of barracks and other established encampments to keep soldiers warm and dry. There were regular train deliveries of supplies from areas of the country untouched by fighting. And there were regular resupplies of fresh troops from points farther north. The Confederates, who staggered into Nashville and then fought to survive the elements for 2 weeks, were what was left of the Army units that had fought the incredibly bloody and traumatic Battle of Franklin. Even before the first shots were fired, they were scarred in too many ways to fathom. And about that battle, suffice it to say that the Union didn't just win the day, it won the western theater of the war here. This was the end of the rebel push on this side of the southern region. When there's cold weather like we've had lately, and especially when I drive down 440 in that cold, I sometimes think of what it must have been like in those Confederate tents. It was, by all accounts, utterly miserable. The scene must have had a lot in common with the conditions you see today in homeless encampments during the winter. Desperate people doing whatever they can to survive and find some kind of warmth as the frigid air seeps into their bones. It's one thing to leave your enemy cold and waiting during a bitter war. It's another thing to leave your community member exposed to those same conditions, which is why a number of groups in Nashville have been fighting very hard to offer better resources to our current unhoused population. Those programs tend to really ramp up in the winter when folks are at heightened risk of dying or experiencing serious health problems. When the temperature drops low enough, volunteers work to get folks off the street for the night and into warming shelters. All through the colder months, Room in the Inn works with area churches to offer places to sleep for people who would otherwise be on the street. But nothing makes as big of an impact as permanent housing. As WPLN's Cynthia Abrams reported last week, the groups that line up housing options for people in the city's homeless population are stuck in a funding limbo right now. The federal continuum of care has been a tremendous resource for funding housing assistance, and nobody can really say what's happening with the program right now or what to expect in the coming year. Grants that were supposed to be delivered at the start of the year might be delayed for months, or maybe they won't come at all. Who knows? The federal government announced sudden, sweeping changes to the program last month. Nashville is part of a multi-city lawsuit challenging those changes. Right before a hearing, just an hour or so before they were supposed to be in front of the judge, federal officials withdrew those changes and said they were regrouping with the legal complaint in mind. But there's no way to tell if that means organizations should assume the old policies are going to continue for the time being, or if a third way of handling things will be announced soon, or what. The reaction from the judge in that case was unusually blunt. She accused the government of creating, quote, intentional chaos. Meanwhile, the weather has turned brutally cold, and people are on the street. waiting for some help to find a place where they can feel safe and warm. In just a few minutes, the first in a 4-part series of excerpts from The Debt, the latest investigation from WPLN News and the Tennessee Lookout. That's coming up after the newscast.
Thematic Static on WNXP is the mixtape we make together, a themed set loosely organized by you, the listener, handpicking songs according to a theme. Airing first Thursdays at 9 a.m. and again Saturdays at 9 a.m., Thematic Static plucks your requests from the socials at WNXP Nashville and by voice memo at 615-320-9100. Thematic Static, the mixtape we make together, supported by United Record Pressing, only on WNXP.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. It's been 40 years since a plane crash in Canada took the lives of nearly 250 soldiers who were flying back to Fort Campbell from a deployment to Egypt. The event was remembered on Friday, the anniversary of the tragedy. Hannah Saad with member station WKMS spoke with the son of one of the crash victims.
Captain Michael Eastman was deployed to the Sinai Peninsula with other soldiers from Fort Campbell enforcing a treaty between Egypt and Israel. On the way back, the transport plane crashed in Gander, Newfoundland, killing Eastman along with 247 other soldiers on December 12, 1985. Philip Eastman was only 10 on the day of the crash. He says his father called his mother from Canada to let her know he'd be home soon.
It was early in the morning. I remember my mom, people calling, and then someone knocking on the door. It probably like 6 o'clock in the morning. I think it was one of the neighbors, and that's when we found out.
The Army base holds an annual ceremony to mark what remains the single largest loss of life event in the 101st Airborne Division's history. I'm Hannah Saad at Fort Campbell.
A landmark Tennessee AI law could be at odds with a new executive order. President Trump signed the order late Thursday to impose a national standard, saying the U.S. must avoid a state-by-state patchwork of rules to stay competitive on AI. Congress has considered a similar move this year, but hasn't passed it. Among the state laws the executive order could affect is Tennessee's Elvis Act, which became law last year. It stands for ensuring likeness, voice, and image security. And Vanderbilt's Journal of Entertainment and Technology Law has called it the king of AI protections. That law is currently part of a suit by the estate of the late country legend Johnny Cash against Coca-Cola for using a sound-alike in a TV ad. Trump's executive order could withhold some funding to states with AI laws deemed onerous by a task force. Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the man wrongfully deported to El Salvador in March, has been released from immigration detention, and a judge has temporarily blocked any further efforts to detain him. A big reason for that is because it appears no immigration judge has ever issued a removal order for him. In order to get a removal order, the government will need to reopen Abrego Garcia's closed immigration case, experts say. That comes with risks for both sides. The Tennessee Valley Authority may soon get new regulators appointed by President Donald Trump, but a key Senate vote for one of the nominees, Nashville businessman Lee Beeman, was delayed after some hard questioning on ethics. WPLN's Caroline Eggers reports.
The TVA board oversees decisions that affect the health and energy costs for millions of people. Trump has nominated 5 people to fill this 9-person board after he short-staffed it through firings. There has been some concern that Trump might want the public utility to go private, so nominees have been asked whether they'd reject privatization, including Beeman.
I think TVA is more uniquely, appropriately operated as a government entity.
But Beeman's hearing was otherwise different. Questions focused on his semi-public life, like accusations of abuse by one of his ex-wives and political activity. Beeman was treasurer of Congressman Andy Ogle's campaign, which is under an ethics investigation. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse also brought up Beeman's denial of the 2020 presidential election and a statement by his pastor Steve Berger, who sat behind Beeman at the hearing, about the LGBTQ community.
I'm offering a quote here. Take a baseball bat and beat the hell out of every single one of them.
Beeman denied knowing the pastor said that. Both he and Berger are or have been members of 2 Christian nationalist groups. Beeman didn't get many questions about energy. He has multiple ties to groups backed by fossil fuel billionaires Charles and David Koch, and Senator Whitehouse suggested no question was needed about support for certain generation sources.
When the ask comes to raise TVA customers' rates by backing away from less expensive clean energy to keep more expensive fossil fuel plants running, it's a pretty safe bet whose back he will have.
And given TVA's current plans, that ask will certainly come up. Caroline Eggers, WPLN News.
Tennessee officials say that every state high school will soon have Club America chapters. Those are student-led organizations affiliated with the conservative group Turning Point USA, founded by the late Charlie Kirk. The announcement came at an event Friday where no media were invited. In an online video, the speakers included Senator Marsha Blackburn and a short clip from Governor Bill Lee. So far, details of the partnership are unclear, including what it might cost and who's paying for it. A former Tennessee deputy has been indicted for using excessive force during the arrest of a Maynardville woman. Former Union County Deputy Ashton Cole Lambert was fired after the arrest in April of this year. Earlier this month, the grand jury indicted Lambert for 1 count of assault and 1 count of official oppression. Tennessee Mental Health Commissioner Marie Williams says state lawmakers have come largely to embrace the concepts of drug treatment that were once controversial. She talked about her life and career on our Daily Show. This is Nashville.
Mainly the barrier, and they know this and they ask about it, is the dollars for the uninsured. We have a gap, and you don't treat people without people. You have to have people to help the people, and you really need trained people to do that.
Williams is asking the legislature for an additional $14 million to fill the gap next year. An estimated 1 million Tennesseans have substance abuse disorders, and at least 100,000 are uninsured. Tennessee has more people who are not insured because the state has not expanded Medicaid, known as TennCare, to cover people who are working but still can't afford insurance. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. A few years ago, Tennessee lawmakers tried to calculate how much the state government had underfunded its public HBCU, Tennessee State University. The number they came up with was around $500 million. But many people don't realize that the fight to fairly fund TSU actually started in the 1960s with a groundbreaking civil rights lawsuit that lasted for decades. Reporters Emily Seiner and Camelia Burris tell this history in our new special called The Debt. Here's an excerpt.
The year is 1968. It's less than 2 months after Martin Luther King was assassinated. And a black law student named Rita Geyer decides to do something bold. She is taking the state of Tennessee to court.
You know, maybe I was naive, but I really believed in the law.
Rita was in school at Vanderbilt in Nashville and teaching a class across town at Tennessee State University. TSU is the state's only historically black public university.
I mean, Tennessee State at that time, it was very dilapidated in my sense.
And even though separate but equal was no longer the law of the land, it was obvious to her that this school was still being treated like a second-class institution. And she could see that there was a very clear example of a public white school being treated very differently than this public black school. The University of Tennessee had a night school in Nashville, and it was expanding. It had just gotten approved for a brand new building downtown. And Rita Geyer's complaint was like, okay, this is a school that's almost all white. It's getting all of these state resources. And 3 miles away on Jefferson Street, there's a much more established public school that is all black that is not getting the resources it needs.
The whole basis of the suit that UT Nashville was going to perpetuate a dual system of higher education, separate and unequal.
This is Dr. George Pruitt, who back in 1975 was a young college administrator. He'd just gotten hired to be the vice president of student affairs at TSU, a big deal for his career.
I was excited about going to Tennessee State for that. I did not know that I was walking into a war.
The reason for the war is this. The Geyer case was being fought in court, and the state's official position was, look, there is nothing wrong with having 2 public universities in Nashville. Like, we're going to build a great UT Nashville, and black people will go there too, and so that solves the whole segregation problem.
Right, except for the fact that the whole reason for the Geyer case was because TSU wasn't getting enough funding. So it seems like they're kind of avoiding the issue here.
Yes, exactly. And it's obvious to many people at TSU at this time what is going to happen. Like, if you have a second university in the same city, TSU will now be competing for funding. It will get even less funding. And one day it will just fade away. And that might be what happened if the state hadn't hired a new president of TSU just before George Pruitt got there. A tall, burly man named Dr. Fred Humphreys, who would become the general of this war.
Thank you very much for coming and sharing with us this information. And I'd like to inform you.
And he's this super young guy as far as college presidents go. He was 38 or 39 at the time. He had never been a college president before. He was a chemistry professor by training, which is like not exactly what I think about when I think about student affairs.
Yeah.
Also, Fred was black at a black school in a time in our country, in time in Tennessee, where the presidents of black colleges were expected to be compliant and obedient. And Fred was not compliant, and he took his obligation as the principal defender of the university very seriously.
You can see this in the record. Right after he was hired, but before he even started, he was interviewed by the Tennessean, and he said in that interview that the state's plan to have 2 universities in Nashville wasn't going to work, and that TSU should be the only institution getting the resources, which was, heresy at the time. And then at his very first Board of Regents meeting, where he was meeting with the board that oversaw TSU, George Pruitt describes a story that he heard about Fred Humphreys going to the bathroom right after the meeting. And the story goes that 2 of the top officials followed him into the bathroom and basically were like, listen, if you don't step in line, you're not going to be here very long.
Wow.
Basically told them they were going to fire him. And I'll never forget what Fred said. And this is what he told me, he said. I mean, I wasn't in the bathroom when this took place. He said, I got a problem. If I do what you ask me to do, I'm going to sell out the institution that I had. I'm going to sell out its history and tradition, and I'm going to sell out the interest of black people in this state and all over the country. If I'm true to those things, you're going to fire me. So given the choices, I'd rather take the consequences.
What a conversation to have in the bathroom.
And then actually Lawrence, his son, offered another part of the story, which may be apocryphal, we don't know, where he said that Fred Humphreys offered to settle it right there, man to man.
That is funny. Squaring up in the bathroom is funny. They could have settled it then and solved us years of controversy.
That began just a simmering and sometimes exploding resentment of Fred Humphreys.
Emily Siner and Camelia Burris talk more about Fred Humphreys' time at TSU and the dramatic twists and turns of the Geyer case in The Debt. And you can find the whole story at WPLN.org/thedebt. We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday. Please consider subscribing on your favorite podcasting app. And thanks so much to all of you who've left 5 stars, a thumbs up, or a review in your app of choice. That little bit of love really does tell the algorithms that more people should hear about us. And of course, everything at WPLN News is listener supported. You can make a donation at WPLN.org. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.